What would you do if you had to cut off the people you loved most in the world? I never thought I'd ever be in a position to ask myself that question. For most of my life, I was the person everyone else relied on, but at the same time, the person everyone blamed. The family scapegoat. A role I never asked for, yet one I was forced to play over and over again. And as I sit here now, phone in hand, staring at my screen as my mom's name flashes in bold letters across the screen, I realize the weight of the decision I've made. I can hear the familiar vibration of my phone, a sound I once dreaded, then tried to ignore, and now it's almost like an old ghost that haunts my life. I should block the number. I should have done that a long time ago. But for some reason, I can't bring myself to hit the block button. Maybe because, deep down, there's still a part of me that hopes for something different. That one day, they'll realize how wrong they were about me. How wrong they've been all along. I stare at the screen for a few moments longer, my thumb hovering over the decline button. I could ignore this call just like I've ignored the others for the past few months. I could go on with my life, pretending like everything is fine. But then, as I feel the tightness in my chest, I wonder if I'll ever be able to escape the past. There it is again, that nagging feeling, the one that told me I'd never be enough for them, no matter what I did. The phone keeps ringing. The seconds drag on like hours. I finally answer. Emma? My mother's voice crackles through the line, fragile, like a woman on the verge of tears. Hi, Mom, I say, my voice calm. Too calm. I'm proud of myself for not immediately bursting into anger. The anger that's been building inside me for years now. The anger that has festered in my chest like a wound that's never healed. I know we haven't spoken in a while, she starts, clearly uncomfortable, and then continues in a low, almost apologetic voice. But I need to talk to you. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm really sorry. Sorry? After everything that's happened? After the years of feeling like I was the problem, the one everyone pointed at when things went wrong? Sorry? I breathe in deeply, trying to keep my voice steady. I've made peace with this decision to cut them off, haven't I? I've finally gotten to a place where I'm not waiting for their approval anymore, not waiting for them to finally get it. Why now? I ask quietly. Why after all this time? There's a long pause on the other end of the line. I can practically hear her grappling with the right words, trying to find a way to fix the broken pieces that have been shattered for years. I can't help but wonder, if this was truly an apology, would she have tried this hard to make things right all those years ago? Because I know I've hurt you. And I don't want to keep making the same mistakes, she finally admits, her voice breaking at the end. I've been thinking about it a lot. I don't want to lose you, Emma. Lose me? Is that what she's afraid of? She already lost me a long time ago, and I'm only just now realizing it. She's always known how to pull at my heartstrings, but I can't afford to be manipulated anymore. Not by her. Not by anyone. I think you already lost me, Mom, I say softly, more to myself than to her. The words hang in the air between us, thick and suffocating. But it's the truth. The truth I've known all along. I was never good enough for them, not in their eyes. No matter how hard I tried to meet their impossible expectations, I always came up short. I was the scapegoat. The one they blamed when things didn't go right, the one who was punished when things fell apart. I close my eyes, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I've said it. I've admitted the truth to myself. And it's one step closer to finding peace. But then, the voice on the other end trembles again, drawing me back into the conversation. I know things haven't been perfect, but Emma, you're my daughter. And I want to try. I want to fix things. There's a catch in her breath, and I can tell she's trying to hold back tears. For the briefest moment, I almost feel guilty for being so distant, for cutting them off so harshly. Maybe I should give them a chance. Maybe I should be the one to heal the rift. But deep down, I know this isn't about healing. It's about control. It always has been. They don't want to fix things for me. They want to fix things for themselves. They want me to fall back into my old role, The one where I'm constantly apologizing, constantly trying to make things right when everything around me is falling apart. But I can't go back to that. I can't keep sacrificing myself just to maintain the fragile illusion that everything's fine. Because it never was. I don't think I can do that, I say, the finality of my words hanging heavily in the air. I've moved on, Mom. I've worked hard to get to where I am now, and I can't keep going back to the past. It's too painful. Silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than words. And, for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of it. After what feels like forever, she speaks again, this time with a note of resignation in her voice. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that I love you. The words feel hollow. They've always felt hollow. But I can't keep hoping they'll mean something more. Not when they've never backed up their words with actions. I love you too, Mom, I say, though I'm not sure if I mean it. And with that, I hang up the phone. The line goes dead, and I sit there for a few moments, staring at my reflection in the darkened screen of my phone. The echo of my mother's voice still lingers in my ears, but I know that the conversation is over. That part of my life is over. And though the weight of this decision is heavy, I can finally breathe again. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? That's what my father told me one evening after I had come home from a late shift at the diner. It wasn't a new accusation. It wasn't the first time they'd all blamed me for things that weren't my fault. But that night, something in his voice had changed. The words stung deeper than they ever had before. Growing up, I never quite understood how things worked in our family. On the surface, everything seemed normal. A house with a white picket fence, a mother who wore aprons even when she wasn't cooking, and a father who worked a stable job at the local bank. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. And yet, I always felt like something was missing. I never felt like I was truly part of it all. I was the one who tried the hardest to please. I was the one who cleaned up the messes no one else cared about. I was the one who made sure everything ran smoothly, even if it meant putting myself last. But somehow, in a family where everything seemed picture perfect, I was always the odd one out. I can still remember the first time I realized I was different. I was about 7, and it was my birthday. I had spent weeks planning my party, inviting my friends, picking out the cake, and decorating the living room with balloons. I remember how excited I was to see my family smiling and celebrating with me. But when the day came, things went wrong. Things always went wrong. My little brother broke the piñata before it was time, my mom had a meltdown because the cake wasn't the right flavor, and my dad had to leave early for a work emergency. By the end of the night, my birthday had turned into a disaster, and I sat on the stairs, watching everyone go about their business as if I had nothing to do with the mess. It wasn't even about the party. It was about the fact that in a family where I tried so hard to fit in, I could never escape the feeling that I was always the problem. But it wasn't just on birthdays. This feeling followed me throughout my childhood. Anytime something went wrong, anytime there was a disagreement, I became the scapegoat. The one who was blamed. The one who was supposed to apologize, even when I wasn't in the wrong. My mother, the emotional one, would turn on me with sharp words, accusing me of causing tension in the house. My father, the quiet one, would retreat into his own world and act like nothing was happening, but I could feel the judgment in the air. And then there was Adam, my older brother. He was perfect in their eyes. He was the good son who did everything right. He never got in trouble, always got good grades, and never questioned anything. To them, he was the golden child. But to me, he was the one who never had my back. Whenever things got tough, he'd silently side with them, never once sticking up for me. I learned early on to keep my emotions hidden. I became an expert at pretending everything was fine, at putting on a brave face when my heart felt broken. I thought that if I tried hard enough, I could make them see me differently, but nothing ever worked. I was always the disappointment. Always the one who wasn't good enough. And so, I kept trying to prove myself even when I knew it was a losing battle. I pushed myself to excel in school, hoping that academic success would finally make me worthy of their approval. But it never did. One of the most painful moments of my life happened when I was 15. I had just received a scholarship to a prestigious summer program, something I had worked so hard for. I expected my parents to be proud, to celebrate my accomplishment. But instead, my mother looked at me with disappointment in her eyes. "Why couldn't you just be like Adam?" she asked, the words cutting through me like a blade. "He's never needed a scholarship. He's already on the path to success." That was the moment I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I achieved, it was never going to be enough. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I could do for them. And no matter how much I gave, it would never fill the void they had created in me. As the years went by, the blame and the expectations only grew. Whenever something went wrong in the family, whether it was my father's job troubles, my mother's health issues, or even Adam's failed relationship, I was the one who had to step in. I was the one who was expected to clean up the mess, to fix things, even when I wasn't responsible. And then came the final straw. It was a family dinner, one of those rare occasions where we all sat together at the table. My father had just been passed over for a promotion at the bank, and my mother was stressed out because of a series of doctor's appointments. The atmosphere was tense, and I could feel the weight of their frustrations in the air. I tried to stay out of it, but my mother turned to me and snapped. "I don't know why you can't just act like a normal person, Emma. You make everything so much harder." For the first time, I snapped back. "I'm not the problem. You are." The words were out of my mouth before I could take them back, and for a split second, I saw their faces, the shock, the disbelief. It wasn't what I had said that mattered. It was the fact that I had finally said it. I had finally admitted the truth to myself. But even then, they didn't hear me. They didn't see me. I was just the scapegoat, the one who was always wrong. And after that night, I knew that no matter how much I tried to prove myself, it would never be enough for them. It's funny how when you finally make the decision to stand up for yourself, everyone around you suddenly takes notice. After years of tolerating the blame, the accusations, the emotional neglect, I thought that cutting off my family would bring peace. But of course, I was wrong. Peace was the one thing I didn't get. Instead, it was as if my decision unleashed a storm that I had spent years trying to avoid. It started with the phone calls. They came the day after I made my final decision. I didn't block their numbers right away because, deep down, I was terrified they would somehow convince me to go back. I knew they would try, my mom, especially. She was good at pulling on my heartstrings, telling me how much she loved me and how much she needed me. The guilt would come creeping in, making me second-guess everything I had just decided. The first call was from Adam. He left a voicemail that was just as cold and calculated as I expected it to be. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a plea for me to come back. It was more of a statement, a declaration of his confusion. "Emma," he said in a clipped tone, "I don't understand why you're doing this. We've been a family for so long. You can't just throw everything away because of some fight." Some fight. I had to laugh at that. This wasn't just some fight. This was my life. This was years of emotional abuse, years of being the scapegoat, years of bending myself into a shape I didn't even recognize just to make everyone else happy. And now he was acting like I was being irrational, like this was something trivial. The voicemail ended with a dry, "I'll talk to you later," but I knew it wasn't over. He wasn't the one I was worried about. It was my mom. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of missed calls and texts from her. Some were simply, "Please pick up," or "I need you, Emma." The more I ignored her, the more persistent she became. She knew how to push all my buttons, knew exactly what to say to make me feel like the villain. She made me feel guilty, like I was betraying the family. I hated myself for even considering the possibility of picking up the phone. But I didn't. What's worse is that every single text, every call seemed to manipulate the situation, trying to make me feel as if the problems we had were all my fault. They would say things like, "We're only trying to help you, Emma," or "You're making such a huge mistake." They never took responsibility. It was always me. Always my fault. Always my problem to fix. The worst part, though, was when I saw my father's name light up on the screen one afternoon. I had been dreading that call. My father and I had never been close, but in the past, he'd occasionally tried to show that he cared in his own cold, distant way. I don't know why, but when his name appeared, I hesitated. Maybe it was because I was starting to doubt myself, wondering if I had made the right decision. Or maybe it was because I still longed for his approval, even if I knew deep down it would never come. "Emma," my father said when I picked up, his voice surprisingly soft, "why are you doing this to us? We're a family." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had braced myself for anger or disappointment, but instead, there was a sense of confusion and sorrow in his tone. He sounded like a man who had been asleep for years, only now waking up to the truth that I wasn't the problem. But I couldn't allow myself to be swayed by this new, sudden softness. I had been through enough to know that this wasn't real concern. This was manipulation. It was always manipulation. And I couldn't afford to fall for it again. "Because I'm tired, Dad," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Tired of being blamed. Tired of being the one who's always wrong. It's exhausting. You don't understand what it's like to feel like you're never good enough, no matter what you do." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind as he processed my words. "I don't understand," he said, his voice flat. "But I do know one thing, you're breaking our family apart, and you'll regret this. One day, you'll see that you were wrong." Regret. He always used that word. And I hated it. It was a word that implied I wasn't allowed to make decisions for myself. It was a word that suggested I was still a child in his eyes, incapable of understanding the consequences of my actions. I hung up the phone before he could say anything else. But the calls didn't stop. They continued for weeks. The voicemail messages became more desperate, more pleading. My mom started calling from different numbers, pretending to be someone else, hoping I'd answer. I even received a letter in the mail one day, written in her familiar handwriting. She tried to appeal to my emotions, telling me how much she loved me, how sorry she was for everything. But I didn't trust her words anymore. Not after everything that had happened. The more they called, the more I realized something. They weren't just trying to fix things. They were trying to regain control. They wanted to put me back in my place, to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. They couldn't accept that I was no longer the person I used to be, the person who put up with everything for the sake of family. I had become the enemy, and they weren't going to let me go that easily. In the days that followed, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next call. It wasn't just the calls, though, it was the constant reminder that my family, the very people who were supposed to love and support me, had turned on me. And it stung more than I ever expected. I thought I had made the right decision, but now, with every phone call and every text, I wondered if I had made a mistake. Was I being too harsh? Had I taken it too far? But then I remembered all the years of manipulation, all the years of feeling like I was never good enough. And I knew I couldn't go back. Not now. Not ever. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I thought cutting off my family would bring a sense of freedom, relief, even a fresh start. Instead, I found myself tangled in the web of guilt, loneliness, and the deep, suffocating weight of wondering whether I had made the biggest mistake of my life. The first few days after I hung up the phone with my father felt like a haze. I had an overwhelming sense of both peace and panic. Peace because I finally wasn't under their thumb anymore. Panic because I didn't know what was next. It was like I had just stepped off a cliff, free falling into an unknown future. I spent the next few weeks in a strange sort of limbo. I didn't know how to fill the empty spaces that were left behind by years of strained interactions. At first, I thought I'd feel relief. but instead, I felt more lost than ever. My house, once filled with the noise of my family's expectations, was silent. I spent nights alone, scrolling through old photos of us, wondering if I'd made the right decision. Should I have tried harder? Should I have fought for their love? But then, in the quiet, something began to stir within me, a small, steady spark of defiance. I knew I had made the right choice. I wasn't the one at fault. It was them who had failed me. I had given them everything, my time, my energy, my loyalty. But what did I get in return? Blame, neglect, rejection. And so the real journey began. Not one of running from my family, but one of self-discovery, one of finding out who I really was beyond the labels they had placed on me. At first, I tried to keep myself busy with work, long hours at the diner, where I could lose myself in the routine. But it was hard to ignore the fact that every time I answered a call or checked a message, there was something inside me that snapped back to life. The voices, my mother's pleading, Adam's confused silence, rang in my ears. One evening, as I wiped down the counter in the empty diner, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I didn't have to check to know who it was. It was my mom again, calling from yet another different number, trying a new tactic. This time, she sent a text. "Emma, I don't know what happened to you. You've always been our little girl. Please come back. We're falling apart without you." My chest tightened. I felt the familiar tug of guilt. After all, she was my mother. I loved her. In a way, I still wanted to be there for her. But I also knew that every time I answered, every time I gave in, I was letting them pull me back into the same toxic dance we'd been doing for years. I turned off my phone, and for the first time in weeks, I felt my body relax. But this was just the beginning. Over the next few months, I began to rebuild. I spent more time with people who valued me not for what I could do for them, but for who I was. I rekindled old friendships with people I had let slip through the cracks during all those years of trying to hold the family together. And there was something else, something I hadn't expected. I started to enjoy the quiet. I could finally think, finally breathe without the weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me. For the first time in my life, I had space to make my own choices without worrying about what anyone else thought. It wasn't easy. There were still nights where the silence was suffocating. There were still moments when I missed them, their faces, their voices, the strange, complicated love that had tied me to them for so long. But I had to remind myself that that love had never been unconditional. But just as I began to feel the strength of my own independence, the calls came back again. At first, it was just once every few weeks. Then, every few days. And then it was nonstop. They wouldn't stop. I was out at the park one afternoon, taking a break from work when my phone started ringing. This time, it was my dad. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I hadn't spoken to him since the last call, the one where I had told him I couldn't go back. I had no idea what he wanted this time. I picked up. "Emma," he said, his voice rough, almost pleading. "I need you to understand something. We're not perfect, but we've always been a family. And you've just thrown that all away." I wanted to hang up. I wanted to shut him out, just like I'd done with everyone else. But something in his voice, something in the way he said family made me pause. "I'm not throwing it away, Dad," I said, my voice shaking, but firm. "I'm letting go. I can't keep being the person you want me to be. I'm not your scapegoat anymore." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, and then, "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this." "You don't have to forgive me, Dad," I replied. "But you need to understand. I'm not the problem here." That was the moment I knew something had changed. I had said the words that needed to be said. For years, I had been carrying the burden of their disappointments, their expectations. And now, I was finally putting it down. That phone call was the last time I heard from my father for a while. But it didn't end the calls. They came from different numbers, and with each new call, I felt my resolve harden. I wasn't running from my family. I was running towards something better. I didn't know what that better was yet. but I was going to find it. It wasn't until that one phone call that I realized how deep the wound really was. I had grown accustomed to the constant barrage of messages, the guilt trips, the threats. Each one was just another reminder of how far they were willing to go to drag me back into their world. But this one changed everything. It was a week after I finally stopped answering the phone. I had made my peace with the fact that they weren't going to let me go easily, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. I had just gotten home from work, a long shift at the diner, and I was too tired to do anything but collapse onto the couch. I grabbed a glass of water, my phone buzzing loudly in my hand. I checked the screen and saw her name. My mother. I hesitated. I'd already made the decision. I wasn't going back, not to that life, not to that manipulation. But the guilt, the same guilt that had ruled my entire life, twisted inside of me. She was my mother. She was the one who had raised me, even if the love I had received from her was warped by her need to control. But then I remembered something my therapist had told me during our last session. You don't owe anyone a relationship that harms you. Family doesn't get a free pass to abuse you just because they're family. I took a deep breath and answered. Emma, she said, her voice thin and trembling. You're really going to do this to us? You're really going to make us suffer like this? Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. In that moment, I could feel the old, familiar tug, the one that had always drawn me back in, despite everything I had been through. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I'm not doing anything to you, Mom, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. You're doing this to yourself. I'm trying to live my life, and you keep dragging me back into this mess. I've spent so many years trying to please you, trying to be what you wanted me to be. But I can't keep doing this. She went silent, and I knew that she was fighting back tears. I could hear her breathing shakily on the other end of the line. I've always loved you, Emma, she said, her voice breaking. You've always been my little girl. You've always been the one I turn to. You can't just throw all of that away. We're family. The words stung, but not in the way they used to. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't begging for her approval anymore. I wasn't trying to be the person she wanted me to be. Family doesn't treat people the way you've treated me, Mom, I said, my voice firm, despite the heavy ache in my chest. It's not love when you make someone feel like they don't belong unless they do everything you want. It's not love when you blame everything on me. I've been carrying this weight for years, and I can't do it anymore. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she might hang up, might turn it all around on me and accuse me of being heartless. But when she spoke again, it wasn't what I expected. I'm sorry, she whispered, so quietly that I almost didn't hear it. I didn't know how much I was hurting you. I thought I was helping you, that I was doing what was best. But I see now that I've been wrong. I see now that I've been pushing you away instead of bringing you closer. Her apology hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't the apology I had been hoping for. It wasn't the grand, heartfelt recognition of all the ways she had wronged me. But it was enough. It was the first time in my life that my mother had admitted she wasn't perfect, that she wasn't always right. For the first time, I felt heard. And it broke something inside me. I started to cry, not out of anger, but out of relief. For so long, I had carried the weight of our broken relationship like a stone around my neck, convinced that I was the problem, convinced that I had to keep trying, keep fighting for something that wasn't meant to be. But in that moment, I realized something. I had nothing to prove anymore. The call went on for a few more minutes, but we both knew what had happened. I wasn't going back to the old dynamics, not even with her apology. There were years of hurt to unpack, years of manipulation and guilt to untangle. But for the first time in my life, I knew that I was finally free to heal. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a while. The tears slowly stopped, but the heaviness was still there. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if my family would ever change, if they would ever understand what I had been through. But I knew one thing for sure. I had taken the first step toward a life that was mine. A life where I wasn't forced to be someone I wasn't. A life where I didn't have to carry their mistakes anymore. I had set a boundary. And no matter how hard they pushed, no matter how many calls they made, that boundary wasn't going anywhere. And as I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, for the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days after the call with my mother passed by in a blur. I couldn't decide if I felt lighter or heavier, but I knew that something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the same person I had been a week ago. Or a month ago. Hell, even a year ago. For so long, I had been chasing after a relationship that wasn't healthy, a love that was conditional, based on guilt and manipulation rather than mutual respect and understanding. But in the end, I had taken the hardest step I could, choosing myself. And as much as it hurt, I knew it was the right decision. The thing about cutting ties with family is that people think you're supposed to feel immediate relief. Like a weight has been lifted and you can go on with your life, happy and carefree. But that's not how it works. It's not a one-time thing. It's a constant battle against the memories, the expectations, the guilt that threatens to pull you back in. The hardest part isn't just letting go, it's staying gone. I still had moments where I questioned everything. Was I wrong? Did I make a mistake? Should I have tried harder to fix things? My mind played these games with me over and over. I still found myself staring at the phone, wondering if I should call my mom back, even though I knew I had already said everything that needed to be said. The fear of being alone, of missing out on the love I'd once hoped for, crept in like a shadow. But then I remembered something else my therapist had told me. You're not just letting go of them, you're also letting go of the old version of yourself. The one who didn't know her own worth. That realization hit me like a punch to the gut, but in the best way possible. I wasn't the person I used to be. I wasn't the family scapegoat anymore. I wasn't the one who had to take all the blame, all the emotional weight. I was someone who deserved peace, respect, and love, not just from others, but from myself. The next few weeks were a blur of self-reflection. I spent time with friends who had supported me over the years, people who had never made me feel like I had to earn their love. I reconnected with my passions, things I had pushed aside in the chaos of family drama. I even started to take better care of myself, mentally, physically, and emotionally. One evening, I went for a walk in the park, the cool air of autumn biting at my skin. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt in sync. I didn't feel lost or unsure of myself. I felt whole. It was during that walk that I received the final message I needed. My brother, Adam, had reached out to me. It wasn't the same as the usual messages I'd gotten from the rest of my family, full of accusations and guilt. It was simple, raw. I don't know what to say. I don't understand everything, but I'm sorry for everything. I wish we could have done things differently. I hope you're okay. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to jump at the chance to fix things, to reach out to him. But I realized, for the first time, that I didn't need to. I didn't need to fix everything. Not everything was broken. I responded with something simple. Thanks, Adam. I'm doing better. I hope you are too. And that was enough. The weight had lifted, not because everything was perfect, but because I knew that I was no longer living in the shadow of their expectations. I wasn't the person I had been when I had first walked away from them. I was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to protect it. As I sat down on the park bench, the cool breeze rustling the leaves around me, I realized how far I had come. There was still so much healing to do, so many things left unsaid, but I had taken the first step. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. In a way, I finally understood what freedom felt like, not the kind of freedom that comes from running away, but the kind that comes from standing your ground and choosing to live for yourself, not for anyone else. My family's calls didn't stop immediately. They kept coming. The messages became more frequent, more desperate, and I felt my resolve tested again and again. They still didn't fully understand. But I knew deep down that I didn't need them to understand. I wasn't responsible for their happiness anymore. They would have to learn to live with their own choices, just like I had to. And I, for the first time, was learning to live with mine. I'd been the family scapegoat for years, the one who shouldered the blame for everything. But now I was no longer playing that role. I was the woman who had broken free, and no matter how many times they called, no matter how many times they tried to reel me back in, I knew one thing for sure: I was done. And that in itself was the beginning of a new chapter. Weeks passed since my final conversation with my family, and though I'd hoped the calls would stop, the opposite happened. The frequency of the messages grew, and it felt like an endless cycle. It wasn't just my mom anymore. Every member of my family found ways to contact me, trying to break down my walls, to bring me back. I knew it was only a matter of time before they'd escalate. I wasn't wrong. One night, a knock at my door shattered the quiet of my apartment. I froze, unsure of what to expect. It wasn't a sound I was used to, no late-night friends stopping by or neighbors needing something. It was late, too late for a casual visitor. I checked the peephole and saw a face I hadn't seen in months, my mother. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe she was here. She had promised she would stop. She had apologized, hadn't she? I thought I was done with this. But there she stood, outside my door, her face haggard, eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying for hours. I swallowed hard, the familiar wave of guilt rushing over me, but I quickly squashed it down. This was different. I had to remind myself that I had made the right decision. I opened the door, taking in a deep breath. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but firm. "What are you doing here?" Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, she seemed lost, like she didn't even know how to start. Her eyes darted around my apartment, avoiding mine. I didn't know where else to go," she said softly. "I've been trying to fix things, Emma. I've been thinking about what you said, and I realized you're right. I've been wrong. I've been a terrible mother, and I need you back. We need you. Please, please, I can't do this without you." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. The desperation in her voice, the sorrow etched across her face, it was all too much to ignore. I felt the familiar pull, the ache to help, to fix things, to go back to the person I had always been for them. But deep inside, I knew I couldn't. I couldn't just fall back into that pattern. I took a deep breath, crossing my arms. "You can't keep doing this, Mom. You can't keep showing up like this, expecting me to fix everything. I told you before, this is my life now. I can't be the person I used to be, and I'm not going to be the person you want me to be." She took a step forward, her hand trembling as she reached out to me. "Emma, please. I can't lose you again. I don't know how to live with myself knowing I've driven my own daughter away. You're all I have left. I know I've messed up, but you're my daughter. You're the only one who can fix this. You're the only one who matters." I felt my chest tighten. Her words were like poison, laced with manipulation disguised as love. I knew the pattern well by now. This was her way of making me feel guilty, making me feel like I was the one breaking the family apart. But I wasn't going to fall for it. "No," I said, my voice shaking slightly but unwavering. "You can't put this all on me anymore. You can't keep asking me to carry the weight of everything that's wrong in this family. I've tried, Mom. I've tried to fix it. But I can't do it alone. And I won't do it anymore." For a moment, there was nothing but silence between us. My mom's expression flickered from desperation to something close to resignation. She swallowed hard and looked down, as if realizing for the first time that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't all up to me. Maybe it was her turn to make the change. But then she took a deep breath, as if summoning one last ounce of strength. "I don't want to lose you, Emma," she repeated, her voice more vulnerable now. "I can't do it without you. I need you." I could see the pain in her eyes, but there was also a flicker of something else, control. She was still trying to keep me in the family orbit, trying to pull me back into the dynamic where I was the one who always fixed things. I shook my head, stepping back from the door, my heart breaking, but my resolve stronger than ever. Mom, I know you're hurting, but I can't be the person you lean on anymore. I've been carrying this weight for far too long, and I have to let go. You're going to have to find a way to fix this without me. You have to let go of me too. Her face fell, and the weight of what I said hung heavy in the air. For a moment, she just stood there, as if processing it all. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. I don't know how to do that, Emma, but I'll try. For you. I'll try. I gave her a small nod, a tight smile tugging at the corners of my lips, though it didn't reach my eyes. That's all I can ask for, Mom. But this is the last time you come to my door like this. You have to start healing on your own. I'm not going to be your scapegoat anymore. With a final glance, I closed the door gently, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I leaned against it for a moment, trying to steady my nerves. It wasn't over yet. I knew that. There would be more calls, more messages, more attempts to pull me back. But this time, I wasn't going to let it tear me apart. I had made my decision, and I was standing by it. The next few days felt surreal. I'd always imagined that cutting off my family would bring me a sense of peace, but instead, I was left with a strange mix of emotions: relief, guilt, anger, but also clarity. I didn't feel like I was living in limbo anymore, waiting for the next family crisis to pull me in. No, now I had control. It was up to me to decide how I wanted to move forward. And yet, part of me still struggled with the consequences of what I'd done. The calls stopped for a while after that night. My mother had given me her word that she would try to change, and for the first time in years, I believed her. It wasn't because I trusted her yet, but because she seemed genuinely willing to take responsibility for the damage she'd caused. But even with that, I knew there was no turning back for me. There was no going back to the person I used to be, and no matter how much my family tried to reel me back in, I couldn't afford to go back to the place where I was constantly sacrificing myself for their happiness. But the silence didn't last forever. A week later, a message from my brother, Adam, appeared on my phone, his name flashing on the screen like a warning bell. I hesitated before opening it, my fingers trembling slightly as I tapped on the notification. I had been doing well, focusing on myself, but deep down I still feared the guilt that came with hearing from him. I was terrified of being pulled back into the family's orbit, where I had always been the one to pick up the pieces. His message was short, just a few lines of text. I don't understand why you did it, but I can't ignore the fact that you're my sister. I've missed you. I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk? My heart skipped a beat. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, to take the first step toward rebuilding the relationship I'd lost with him. After all, he was my brother. But another part of me, the part that had spent years being manipulated and gaslight, knew I couldn't let him in so easily. It wasn't just about him being my brother. It was about protecting the space I had worked so hard to create for myself. The space where I was no longer being treated as the family scapegoat, the one who could be blamed for everything that went wrong. I sat with the message for a while, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to respond, but I wasn't sure what I could say that wouldn't bring me back to the place I had fought so hard to escape. But then I realized that if I truly wanted to move forward, I had to be honest, not just with him, but with myself. I couldn't keep hiding behind a wall of silence, pretending that nothing had happened. If I ever wanted to heal, I needed to find a way to express what I was feeling without sacrificing my boundaries. So, after a long pause, I started typing. I don't think I'm ready to talk right now, Adam. I'm still processing everything. I hope you understand that this isn't about you. This is about me, finally choosing myself. But I do appreciate your message, and I'm glad you reached out. I hit send before I could overthink it, putting my phone down and walking away from it. I knew I couldn't let myself fall into the trap of second-guessing my decisions. I had made it clear to him and to everyone else that I was done being the scapegoat, and nothing would change that. The days that followed felt oddly peaceful, and I could feel myself finally beginning to breathe again. I was doing things for me, taking long walks, reconnecting with friends, pursuing hobbies I had put on hold. It was as if I had rediscovered a part of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. Then, one afternoon, as I was sipping coffee in a cafe, I saw him. Adam. He was standing by the door, looking around, scanning the room as if searching for someone. When his eyes met mine, they widened in surprise, and he immediately walked toward me, a hesitant smile on his face. "Hey, Emma," he said softly, sitting down across from me without waiting for permission. "I didn't expect to see you here." I froze for a moment, my pulse racing. He had come to me, despite my message. The guilt crept up on me like a shadow, but I refused to let it control me. This was my moment, my space. "Adam," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I told you I wasn't ready to talk yet. Why didn't you respect that?" He looked down, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his coffee cup. "I'm sorry, Emma. I should have respected your boundaries. I miss you. I didn't know how to fix things without seeing you face to face." I took a deep breath, my mind spinning. As much as I loved him, as much as I wished things could be different, I couldn't ignore the truth. We had both been damaged by the same toxic patterns, and now I had to stand firm in my own healing. "I know you miss me, Adam. And I miss you too. But I can't just forget everything that's happened. I can't pretend that nothing's wrong. I'm still hurt. I'm still angry. And I need time to heal. For now, I can't be a part of this family dynamic anymore." His face faltered, and I could see the weight of my words sinking in. The guilt I had felt for so long was replaced by something stronger now, self-respect. "I understand," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I just want you to know that I'm here whenever you're ready." I nodded, though my heart was torn. "I know, Adam. But right now, I have to do this for me. I have to heal without the pressure of being the person I used to be for everyone else." As he stood to leave, he paused and looked back at me, his eyes softening. "I hope you find peace, Emma." "I really do." "I will," I said, my voice more confident than I felt. "I will." After he left, I sat there for a while, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was the final test, the last attempt to pull me back into the toxic family dynamic. But I had passed. I had stood my ground. And though I was still healing, I knew I was no longer the person who had always put everyone else first. This was my life now. And for the first time in years, I was going to live it on my own terms. It had been a few weeks since I'd last seen Adam, and the silence between us had grown more comfortable. There were no more surprise visits, no more unexpected messages. Just a peaceful, almost cathartic stillness. The weight of the family dynamic that had always felt so heavy on my shoulders was starting to feel lighter. But even with this newfound peace, there was something gnawing at me: forgiveness. I had told myself that I was done with my family. I had severed ties to protect myself. I had cut them off, and in doing so, I'd given myself the space I desperately needed. But despite the relief, there was still a part of me that couldn't fully escape the past. The memories of being blamed for everything that went wrong in the family, the years of emotional manipulation, those scars weren't easy to erase. I was walking down the street one sunny afternoon when I saw a familiar face. A woman stood at a corner, holding a sign asking for donations to a local shelter. It was my Aunt Margie. I hadn't seen her in years, not since I left the family behind. She had always been one of the more understanding members, the one who defended me when things got tough. For a brief moment, I thought about walking past her, avoiding the confrontation altogether. But I stopped myself. I owed her at least a conversation. I walked up to her, my heart beating a little faster. She didn't notice me at first, too busy speaking to a passerby. But when I cleared my throat, she turned around, and her eyes widened in surprise. She looked older, a little worn, but her smile was the same. "Emma," she said, her voice soft. "Is that really you?" I nodded, my hands instinctively folding in front of me. "It's me." She looked me over, as if trying to see if I was still the same person she remembered. After a few moments, her eyes softened. "You look different. You look good, Emma. Are you okay?" "I'm better," I said, the words feeling strange but true. "I'm working through a lot, but I'm getting there." She stepped closer, her face serious now. "I'm glad to hear that. I've missed you, sweetheart." "We all have." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. The guilt I'd been running from for so long crept back into my chest. The desire to reconcile with my family, to fix everything, was still there. But I had already made my decision. I had to remind myself that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about me choosing to live for myself. "I know you've missed me, Aunt Margie," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. But the truth is, I needed to leave. I needed to step away from all of it. From the guilt, the expectations. It was suffocating. Her eyes flickered with understanding, but there was sadness there too. "I understand, Emma. I really do. But it wasn't just about you, you know? The family, they're all hurting too. We're all trying to figure out what went wrong. And we're sorry. For everything." My heart clenched at her words. They were almost identical to what my mom had said, what Adam had said. They were all sorry, but the damage had been done. Could forgiveness truly fix it all? Could I ever forgive them for the years of emotional abuse, for putting me in a position where I had to bear the weight of their failures? I stood there, contemplating her words. I wanted to forgive. I wanted to believe that people could change, that healing was possible. But I wasn't sure if I was ready. The pain I'd carried for so long wasn't something that could be brushed aside with an apology. And I wasn't sure if I could forgive them for what they had done to me, for the years of feeling invisible and worthless. "I don't know if I can forgive them, Aunt Margie," I said finally, the words feeling like a confession. "I don't know if I can forgive anyone for what happened." She took a deep breath, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "I understand. But you don't have to forgive anyone for them, Emma. You do it for you." Forgiveness isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of holding on to all that anger. It's about finding peace even if they never change. Her words hung in the air, lingering between us. Forgiveness wasn't something I had ever considered in the midst of my anger. I had always seen it as something that required the other person to change, to make up for what they had done. But what if it didn't? What if forgiveness was simply about my own healing? I looked at my aunt, her kind eyes filled with understanding, and I realized she was right. Forgiveness didn't have to mean forgetting. It didn't mean I had to accept their behavior or allow them to continue to hurt me. It meant letting go of the anger that had kept me chained to the past. "I don't think I'm ready yet," I said, my voice steady. "But maybe one day I will be. For me, not for them." She smiled gently, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "Take your time, Emma. Healing isn't a race. You don't have to do it all at once. Just take one step at a time. And when you're ready, you'll know." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my chest. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something that could be forced. Maybe it was something that would come in its own time, when I was truly ready. But for now, I didn't have to carry that burden. I had made the decision to put myself first, and that was enough. We talked for a few more minutes, and then I said my goodbyes. As I walked away, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I was no longer bound to the past. I had taken control of my life, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living. The days after my conversation with Aunt Margie were quieter, but in a way, that made them harder. Silence had a way of creeping in, a reminder that I was alone in this new chapter of my life. I had always been surrounded by the noise of family drama, constant demands, and expectations. But now, when the silence surrounded me, it felt like I was at the edge of an abyss, one where I had to figure out who I was on my own, without the crutch of familial identity. But as the days stretched on, the guilt began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of independence and strength. I was finally starting to feel like I had the control I needed over my life, and that was a powerful feeling. I took to walking more, spending time in nature, and reconnecting with old friends who had faded into the background as I had become wrapped up in my family's drama. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed the simple things, how peaceful it could be to just be by myself. Then, one evening, as I was preparing to head out to dinner with a friend, my phone rang. The name on the screen sent a chill through my body. Mom. I stared at the name for a few seconds, my heart racing. It had been weeks since I'd cut ties with my family, weeks since I'd told them I needed space. In that time, I had built walls around myself, walls that had allowed me to breathe and heal. But now, the sound of her name on my phone seemed to tear through all the progress I had made. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and let it ring a few more times before finally answering. Hello. There was a long pause before she spoke, and in that silence, I could feel the weight of all the years of hurt between us. Her voice cracked slightly when she finally spoke. Emma? It's me. It's Mom. The familiar pang of guilt stirred inside me. I hadn't expected her to reach out so soon, and certainly not in this way. Her voice sounded so small, so broken. For a moment, I considered hanging up. Part of me wanted to protect my peace, to continue down this road where I no longer had to live in the shadow of their demands. But then, another part of me, the part that still loved her, despite everything, felt the pull to listen. Hi, Mom, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I'm sorry for everything, Emma, she began, her words tumbling out. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I realize now just how wrong I was. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't know how I let things get so bad between us. I closed my eyes, letting her words wash over me. I had spent years trying to get her to see the hurt she'd caused, trying to get her to understand how much her behavior had impacted me. But it had never worked. This time, though, she sounded different. Sincere. Vulnerable. I know you've been hurt, she continued, her voice shaky. But I've been hurting too. I didn't know how to fix things. I thought if I just kept pushing, kept trying to make things right, it would all fall into place. But I see now that I was just making it worse. I don't want to lose you, Emma. I don't want to lose my daughter. I swallowed hard, feeling the sting of her words. My mother had always been a source of emotional chaos in my life. I had spent years trying to get her to love me, trying to please her, trying to earn her approval. But it was never enough. Her demands were constant, and when I didn't meet them, I was made to feel like I was the one who was failing. Mom, I said softly, I've spent so many years trying to make things right with you, trying to fix everything. But I can't keep doing that anymore. I need to take care of myself. I need to find my own peace. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing softly, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on both of us. In that silence, I realized something. This conversation, this call, wasn't just about her. It was about me, too. It was about me learning to stand up for myself and to stop letting her hold me hostage in a relationship that was never truly healthy. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know. And I'm sorry. I've been selfish. I've been so focused on my own pain that I couldn't see yours. But I want to change. I want to be a better mother to you. If you'll let me. My heart ached at her words. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that things could change, that we could start fresh and build something healthier between us. But deep down, I knew that healing wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't something that could happen overnight, just because she said the right words. It was something that would take time if it happened at all. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Mom, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I need time. And I need you to respect that. She didn't say anything for a moment, but I could hear her sobbing quietly on the other end of the line. It was the sound of someone who was finally facing the truth of what they had done. I wasn't sure if this would be the turning point for our relationship, or if this was just another false hope. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not without a change. Not without her showing me, through her actions, not just her words, that she was truly willing to make amends. "I understand," she said finally, her voice soft. "Take all the time you need, Emma. I'll be here whenever you're ready." I took a deep breath, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. "Thank you," I whispered before hanging up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that things could be different this time. But another part of me was still terrified of getting hurt again. I had worked so hard to protect myself, to build a life where I wasn't constantly drained by the demands of my family. Could I really open myself up to them again? Could I risk my own peace for the sake of trying to fix a relationship that had been broken for so long? I didn't have the answers. But I knew one thing. This call had changed something. It had cracked open a door I had long kept shut, and now the possibility of healing, of forgiveness, felt more real than ever. I wasn't sure where the journey would lead, but for the first time in a long while, I was willing to walk down that path, at my own pace and on my own terms. The weeks that followed my conversation with Mom were a blur. I spent most of my time reflecting on the conversation, sorting through the flood of emotions it had stirred within me. The weight of my decision to answer her call still felt heavy, but at the same time, there was a flicker of hope deep inside me. A hope that maybe things could eventually be different. Maybe forgiveness was possible. But as I moved through the days, I knew that it wouldn't be an overnight transformation. I needed to keep taking care of myself and allow time to heal the wounds of the past. I kept my distance, both physically and emotionally. I didn't respond to my mother's follow-up messages, not out of malice, but because I needed to protect the fragile space I had created for myself. My therapy sessions became more focused on navigating the idea of reconciliation and whether it was something I could or should pursue. My therapist, Naomi, encouraged me to give myself grace and reminded me that setting boundaries didn't mean I didn't care for my family. It meant that I was learning to care for myself first. In the meantime, I focused on what I could control. My job, which I had once seen as just a way to get by, started to feel more like a purpose. I found joy in the small victories, completing projects, taking on new challenges, and reconnecting with colleagues I hadn't spoken to in months. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and for the first time, I could see a future where I wasn't defined by my family's expectations. One Thursday afternoon, I received a message from Adam. It wasn't unusual for him to reach out every so often, but this one was different. He asked if we could meet. I hadn't seen him in person since the day I had walked away from the family, and although the idea of facing him filled me with anxiety, I knew I needed to do it. He was a part of my past, and whether I liked it or not, I had to address the unresolved tension between us. We met at a small cafe downtown, one of those cozy, quiet places where the atmosphere felt familiar yet neutral. I arrived a few minutes early, giving myself time to calm my nerves before he showed up. When Adam walked through the door, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It had been so long since I'd seen him, and his presence stirred up old memories of our childhood, of family dinners, of all the times we had argued. But there was something different about him now. He looked older, more tired, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. He spotted me almost immediately, and a small, tentative smile crossed his face as he approached. "Hey," he said softly, sitting across from me. "It's good to see you." "Yeah, you too," I replied, my voice quieter than usual. The conversation started slowly, as we both tried to navigate the awkwardness of our reunion. We exchanged small talk at first, talking about work, life, and how things had been going since the last time we'd spoken. But after a few minutes, Adam sighed and leaned forward, his expression turning more serious. "Emma," he began, "I need to say something. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened between us, and I want to apologize." For everything. My heart skipped a beat. The words I had longed to hear for years, yet had never thought would come, were finally being spoken. I had imagined this moment in my mind countless times, what I would say, how I would react, what would happen afterward, but now that it was real, I found myself struggling to respond. "I'm sorry for the way I treated you," he continued, his voice low. "I was angry, and I didn't understand what you were going through. I was selfish. I put my own issues before you, and I can't take that back. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see the hurt I caused." I sat there, taking in his words, unsure of how to process them. Part of me wanted to just forgive him right then and there, to erase the pain of the past, but another part of me reminded me that healing couldn't be rushed. Trust couldn't be restored just because someone apologized. It was something that had to be earned. "I've thought about everything too," I said, my voice steady. "And it's been hard. I don't want to just brush everything under the rug. There were a lot of things that happened that I can't forget, and I don't think I ever will. But I'm trying to heal, and I need to do that for myself." Adam nodded, his eyes sincere. "I get that. I'm not asking you to forget or to forgive me right away. I needed to tell you how sorry I am." For a moment, there was silence between us. The years of tension hung in the air, but it didn't feel as suffocating anymore. It felt like we were both acknowledging the past and allowing ourselves the freedom to move forward, whether that meant together or apart. "I'm not sure what comes next," I said finally. "But I'm willing to take things one step at a time. I'm not saying everything is fixed, but maybe we can start over slowly." Adam smiled, a hint of relief in his eyes. "That's all I can ask for." As we sat there, talking about the future and what that might look like for us, I realized that this moment, this conversation, was the start of something new. It wasn't about erasing the past or pretending it never happened. It was about acknowledging the hurt, the mistakes, and the growth that had taken place. It was about recognizing that I wasn't the same person I had been when I left my family behind. I had changed, and so had they. When we parted ways that day, there was no grand gesture, no promises of everything being perfect. But there was a sense of possibility in the air. The walls that had once kept me isolated from my family, especially from Adam, were starting to crack, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. In the days that followed, I continued to move forward. I kept focusing on my own growth and healing, taking each day as it came. I didn't know where my relationship with my family would go, but I knew that whatever happened, I had learned to stand up for myself. I had learned that healing wasn't just about forgiveness, it was about finding peace with myself first. And with that peace, I knew I could face whatever came next. Because, in the end, the only person I had to answer to was me. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?